Welcome to The Life of Hair. My name's James Atkinson. Thank you for choosing to join into this week's episode. Now, this week's episode, I've got a very good old friend of mine here in the chair. She's been here before. She's had her hair done for a video. It's one of the very early shag haircuts that I did. And in fact, so many people in the comments section on that video ask if this is my sister. And it is not. Did you know that?
No. That's very sweet.
That is funny, isn't it? This is Hannah. Welcome, Hannah. Hannah, tell us a little bit about your hair and what you'd like to achieve from today.
Oh gosh. Well, it's been probably about 2 years since I've had my hair cut.
Yes.
I've been cutting it myself like most people in lockdown probably have. Classic lockdown haircuts.
Yes.
It's a bit scraggly, but I was cutting a bit of a shorter fringe.
Yes.
And having it just, you know,
Long
nice and long.
Yeah,
maybe
great. So
few
we're
layers or whatever.
Stick with the short fringe vibes?
Yes.
Yeah.
I've got
Like
a
it.
photo I can show you, but I think I've
Yeah.
got some wispy little bits that might, maybe just a straight block.
Just a
I don't
square.
know. What
Yeah,
do you think?
nice. Yeah. Well, you've got a
Just
good
long.
face for square, so that's good. So when we're thinking about, fringes and people's face shapes, obviously we want to make an assessment. Hannah's face shape's quite flat through the sides here. It's rounded in the bottom, so it's kind of pushing towards oval. That's fine to create a square line because square lines create or draw the eye horizontally across the face. If she had a really round face and we put a line in that's going to draw the face out wider, that's not necessarily going to be a good thing. The other thing as well is when the face is oval, the horizontal line cuts the face down a little bit. I mean, she hasn't got a long head by any stretch of anyone's imagination, but that horizontal line will also kind of create an abrupt finish to the ovalness of the shape of her face, and obviously then prevent it looking too long. The only way it would look too long is if we created something that had a lot of height. Now that's not going to happen. The rest of her hair is going to be pulling down this way, so we do want something to sort of protect that a little bit, and that fringe will obviously play a big part in that. A couple of things to think about as well, obviously, as Hannah was just saying, it's a little wispy in the corners here. It's also DIY fringe, which is fine by me. As you well know, I don't mind a bit of DIY hairdressing. There are some factors to think about. We'll talk about the technicalities of cutting that fringe in later. Also, the texture's curly, and I know some people believe that cutting a curly fringe is not a good thing, and people avoid cutting curly fringes like the plague. But I actually like a curly fringe, and even if it's worn naturally, it looks kind of cool. Even if it's really short and kind of those. I can't think of the name of them now, but like a sort of very short square fringe, like a sort of 30s fringe, I guess. I'm kind of happy to cut those on curly hair as well. So we'll talk about some of the things you might want to think about, and you might want to talk to about your client, because obviously when you've got curly hair in the chair, it could shrink, and that shrinkage could make the fringe look shorter. So obviously you need to make the client aware, if this is the first time they've ever cut their fringe like that there's a good chance that when they go home, wash their hair, and then their fringe is going to look a centimetre or more shorter. So definitely factor that in. If you're going to cut in a curly fringe, then you might want to leave it that little fraction longer. It's already fairly short, and I've seen a picture on Hannah's Instagram recently of her fringe when it was even shorter, and that would probably require quite a lot of maintenance, as in it would need blow drying regularly for it to look kind of sharp and clean. Obviously on the days where Hannah can't be arsed and she ain't getting out of bed for the rest of the day, it don't matter. Leave it as it is. It's all good. But on those times where you want to style it or you want it to look nice, it is going to require a little bit of effort on Hannah's behalf. Now on the rest of her hair, it is tapering down towards the ends. It's getting a little tired. As she said, she cut it herself. We're just going to clean up the ends. It's no big deal. But I will talk to you about some of the factors that you want to think about when you're cutting someone with curly hair, and how their hair might shrink, and what I think about when I'm going to cut someone with curly hair. One of the assessments that I make before I cut someone's curly hair is I grab one strand of their curl whilst it's in its kind of natural form, and I stretch the curl down towards the ground, and then I let go, and I see how far the curl returned from where I let go to the point at which it sits now. That gives me a good gauge as to how much the curl will shrink once I actually then cut Hannah's hair. So it's really, really important that we make that assessment, and if there's different curls in different areas, so some bits are more curly than others, then you do want to go around and sort of double check that it springs up in exactly the same way all throughout the hair. That piece, for instance, didn't spring up, but that could be because the hair needs to be styled. So if you go around, just double check that it returns, how much it returns, about 2 inches. If I then don't allow for that spring, Hannah's hair will be too short, which is a common scenario when you're dealing with people with curly hair. So it is something to think about when you are assessing the hair before you wash it. Don't just say, oh lovely, let's go back to the basin, and you don't know how much that hair is going to spring back, because once it's wet it won't spring up. Now, layers in curly hair, double-edged sword. You know, some people they are great and some people don't want their hair to be so big. Hannah does tend to style her hair straight sometimes, and therefore overlayering Hannah's hair would be a bit of a negative thing, because ultimately what would happen is that it would make her hair bigger and more challenging to manage. So I'm going to assume, although, and Hannah may confirm that that we probably won't be layering this today, but there is a little bit of dryness on the ends of those hairs that we probably won't reach, because we're not going to cut enough off of this length. As I said, there is a bit of a difference between the two. So Hannah, yes. What I probably would say to you is if we just take the dust off this top, you know, and that will just keep it tidy, and it's not really going to create a layer as such, no more than this existing anyway. In fact, probably Hannah's hair would work a lot better if we didn't have any layers in there. We could grow that down to the perimeter completely, because it's not volume Hannah's after. She's got plenty of that naturally. Does that sound all right, Hannah?
Yeah, it sounds good.
Good. Right, we're going to give it a wash and we'll be back in a second. Okay, so we have got Hannah's hair all washed, and I have pre-sectioned her hair off, centre parting, straight down the middle to the top of her occipital bone, from the occipital bone to the back and the middle of each of her ears. Now, this is my first section. Now, some people might think this is a large, but I personally believe that, especially when the hair density is not very thick towards the ends, that, you know, taking a section smaller than that is a bit futile. So anyway, what we're going to do is we're going to look at just cutting this first section, and this first section says it all, does it all, is the be all and end all. So I'm going to cut this and then I'll show you the rest in a second, because once we drop down the top, because there is a little bit of kind of layers in there, it won't meet the perimeter anyway. Now remember, we discovered that it bounced up about 2.5 inches. So if we cut off 2.5 inches, it'll be 5 inches shorter approximately than it would, because it will make it lighter. So it will jump more when we make it lighter. So we do need to factor that into how we cut this. So we're going to take off a wee bit, the sort of fluffy stuff. Now, one of the things that I would say here is that the chair is kind of impeding our cutting line a little bit, because what we want is 0 elevation. So there'd be a couple of choices here. The first choice would be to get Hannah to stand up, and then we could cut her hair with no elevation. But obviously we're talking salon, commercial environment. If we're doing this, you know, for speed, we could just ask Hannah to put her head forward, and that would negate any of the elevation that you would need to do to cut the hair. So it's kind of 50-50. I know that purists out there would be vomiting at that idea, but also we do need to be realistic that we do have to make money and get these jobs done reasonably quickly. So I would say that it would be hard to see the difference between the two if we did them comparatively side by side. So that gives you an example of the differences. Now in this particular instance, just because I want to stand by my word, I'm going to do it as I said I was. I'm going to tilt Hannah's head forward, and then I'm going to hold it between my fingers. I'm going to keep it as low elevation as possible, so it's just touching the chair but it's not bending around the chair, and I'm going to cut my square line. Now I do see stylists getting their clients out of the chairs to cut, and I actually do it myself sometimes. It depends ultimately on how thick the hair is. If it's really, really thick hair, then I would get Hannah to stand up. But the hair's not really, really thick, sort of normal density, texture, so therefore we don't have to kind of get too excited about getting Hannah to stand up, because we're not going to create tons and tons of graduation, because the hair won't build up too much. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to take another section, similar size, so we've got about a 4-inch section. So we're going to come up now to the position between where the crown is and the middle of the occipital bone. We're going to take a horizontal section through to the top of the ear, and then what we'll do is we'll comb that down towards the perimeter, and we'll see how much we've got overhanging from the section we've just cut. Now it's slightly less than we took off, if we can just see that on the camera hopefully. So what we'll do is we'll come in and we'll just got a clear visual on our guide. Now that's the beauty of taking a larger section, is that we've got a nice clear guide. If we took a section that was even 2 inches in depth with hair of this density, we wouldn't have had a clear visual of where we were going to cut, because we wouldn't have had the hair density to see where we were going. So we'll take our next section now, and again same position through to the top of the ear, and I just work one side and then the other. There's no benefit to working both sides simultaneously, one side then the other. You know, we're not looking like graduated bobs or, you know, those kind of things where sometimes it is beneficial to work one side then the other side. This is just a square line in the back. Once we've dropped that last section over, there's a tiny little bit of hair to remove there, but not a lot. One of the things that, dependent on your kind of thoughts, feelings and where you were trained, one of the things that we can then do is come through the sides here and then pull the hair down square, and obviously square off any of the weight that we've built up towards the front, because remember, when we pull the hair back it gets longer towards the front, and if we pull the hair forward it gets longer towards the back. So we've pulled all the hair back and we've cut a square line, which means it's getting longer to this point, the point above the ear. So I'll just show you how that would look, and I would also say to you that on hair, especially finer hair textures, medium to fine, that you probably wouldn't need to pre-section this side off and split it into 2, especially if the hair was got some layers in it like this, has got a little bit of layer in it, because you just wouldn't see the density. Now all that you would ever take off is just a tiny little corner on this edge, which is something that we're just not going to bother with, because it's not going to overly impact the shape, it's not going to make it any healthier, it's not going to really improve the haircut at all. It's just going to be that we're going to cut one side and then cut the other side, and naturally that's just going to cost us time when it's not going to improve the absolute end result. So what we'll do then is we'll take a pre-section on Hannah's hair. So we're going to go from the highest point of the head down towards the back of the ear. Now on Hannah's head, the highest point is quite far back, it's like here. It actually drops down quite steeply from that point. It doesn't raise up and down. So the high point is, you know, quite often around here on a lot of people's heads, but it's a bit further back on Hannah's head. But that's really interesting because it's actually in line with the back of her ear. So from a head geometry standpoint, it's all where it should be. It's just a bit further back than where you expect it to be, because it's really close to where the head starts to curve going down towards the occipital bone. So we'll split the hair into 2, push the front hair forward and the back hair backwards, separate the 2 out just like so. If you struggle to take clean sections, quick tip for you, put your finger at the point where you want the section to end. So I've got my finger there waiting, and then you just comb down towards your finger, and you're quite often going to take a clean section that way. One will connect to the other, your brain will do it automatically. But if you don't have a finger there, then quite often you can go off track if you struggle to take sections cleanly. So that's something to think about, just a little bit of one of those things that not everybody always pays a lot of attention to. So what we're going to do now is we are going to cut the front of Hannah's hair first. So we're going to take this front section, depends on your hands really, I'm going to take it in a oneer, but if you haven't got really big hands then you might want to take it in a couple of sections. But the main reason is that the hair density doesn't justify taking too many sections here. So as we elevate this section up and we over direct it back to the line of which we've just created our section, we'll see that probably 50% of the hair will have fallen away back down here because it's never going to reach that exterior shape. So we're also going to over direct back towards me because we want to extend some of the length going that direction because the hair is weaker and finer around the front. And we are literally just taking off no more than 1 centimetre off of those hair. So then we'll split that section into 2 and we'll put half of that section roughly into the opposite side, and we'll pop that down there out of the way. And then we come in, we do exactly the same thing on this opposite side. We pick up our section, we over direct it back towards me. We've got a clear guide now from that opposite side. Remember, lots of the hair is going to fall out, but that's okay. And we can see now a clear guideline and the length over on the left-hand side here. Now, to move on to the back, what we need is a guideline. And the way that we'll find that guideline is that we'll take a 1 centimetre section in front of the section we've just cut and comb it into the back. So we've now got a clear guide from that section for travelling through the back. We'll do exactly the same thing on the opposite side. Pull it back. So what we're going to do through the back section now is create a profile section that runs straight down the centre back, just like so. We're going to make it about 1 inch, 1.5 inches wide, because we want a good clear guideline to work with. Now, I'm a right-hander, so I'm going to stand on the right-hand side. I'm going to elevate the section straight up, and then I'll have a clear visual from my front section. And I'm not going to over-direct this in any particular way, shape or form. I'm going to keep the hair elevated straight up, and I'm going to cut a square line, just like that. Then what we're going to do is split that section down the centre back, just like that. So we've got 50% of the section we've just cut on the right-hand side, and we've got 50% of the section we've just cut on the left-hand side. We'll then take a centre section, split this hair into 2 separate quadrants. So we've got 1 and 2. Now, because of the change of density towards the back of the ear, you might want to over direct this section to that section. In this particular instance, it isn't going to make any difference whatsoever. So we can pick up this section. Now remember, because we are in the back, there is going to be a lot of hair that doesn't reach the perimeter, and we can see it all falling away right now through here. And there's a little bit of hair just to tidy up from our visual clear guideline through the front there. Now what we're going to do is take this section. We need to take some of that hair we just cut as a guide, pick up this section, elevate the hair straight up to the ceiling, and cut a square line, just like so. So really simple, really easy to do. We've cut that whole quadrant. Now, some of you are going to be thinking about cross-checking and how does that impact on this technique. Let's check it out. So we're going to take a horizontal section like so, elevate the hair straight up to the ceiling, and there we go. Clean as a whistle. No dramas. So for those people that think over-directing or taking larger sections is going to impact, you know, the way that their haircuts will come out, I can assure you it will not. So I'll show you again, straight down the center of this section here, pick up this section, elevate this hair straight up from the head, cut a square line. Split that section down so that you've got some guideline, pick up this section, elevate the hair straight up to the ceiling, and cut a square line. Okay, so as we mentioned earlier, Hannah's has a DIY fringe, which is fine, but what we want to do is obviously make it as professional as possible at this point. So most of the time, fringes work really well as a triangle shape. I would cut 90% of my fringes in this triangle formation. It comes to the point at which the hair then starts to drop back on each side. And one of the main reasons as well I would recommend doing a triangle shape on Hannah's hair, which she's actually, to be fair to Hannah, she's done a pretty good job. It's pretty close to being a perfect triangle, got to say. There's a little bit of rogue hair here, and there's a little bit of rogue hair here, but we'll incorporate that. One of the main reasons on Hannah's hair that it would be impertinent to have a triangle is that in the middle here, she's got a little bit of a stronger kink in her hair. So if we have some hair that goes over that, should her hair go kinky when she's blow dried it straight, she'll have that extra length that won't be sitting on her skin to cover any of those awkward bends. Now, some people say to me, you know, and have said to me in the past, videos have seen me cut wet fringes and stuff, you know, am I mad? Have I lost my mind? You know, is that a good thing? And I would say to those guys, look, providing that we allow for the fact that the fringe is going to shrink and hair is, in this particular instance, curly, it's not going to make a huge amount of difference whether we cut it wet or dry. It's just about making allowances for the fact that we know that it's going to shrink. I'll probably refine it when it's dry, and I'll probably cut it a fraction longer than we probably want the end result to be, but that will be here nor there. Cutting wet fringes is no drama, providing we leave ourselves some room to play with once the hair is dry. One thing I will say though, if you are going to cut a wet fringe, it doesn't really matter how wet the fringe is, partially dry is much worse. You don't want it to be partially dry because the elasticity of the hair is different. So you want it to be consistently damp across the whole fringe. Don't think, oh, well, it's sort of dry, so then I'll just damp it down and then do the fringe. So fringe is a visual game, which what I quite like about fringes actually. Hannah showed me a picture of a fringe that was probably like a finger's width above the eyebrows. So as we just discussed, if Hannah just pops her head up a little bit, that's right, awkward I know, but you know. And what we're going to do is we're going to take about 1/2 centimetre off the fringe as it is, and then we'll dry it off and we'll shorten it as we need to. And then we'll also incorporate some of those pieces that probably should have been there previously as we cut this fringe in now. Now we're going to cut a square fringe, so what we want to do is make sure that the hair is coming over towards the centre. That will increase the length towards the corners, but will give us a perception of a square fringe. Then we can dry that fringe, straighten it, and then we can cut it shorter as we need to. Okay, drying fringes. One of the things we want to do is to control the movement in this fringe as soon as possible. So if you can still hear me, that would be great. But if you can't, then so be it, and this will never make it to the video. We want to control the movement by blow drying the hair side to side to change the direction of the root area. Now, because we re-sprayed the hair, actually makes the hair a little bit more manageable. And once we start to get the hair almost dry, we can start to position the hair in its final shape that we want to create it into. So getting that hair, just working it side to side in the beginning, getting the hair moving really helps to control any of the growth patterns within the fringe area. And then you can just use your small round brush to smooth. Now we're not really kind of turning the round brush specifically, we're just stretching down the hair towards the face. It's really straightforward, super simple to do, and just make sure that we kind of get that hair to sit nicely in position. So if we look now throughout the hair, it's all well controlled and nicely straightened with our brush. Now to finish it off, when it comes to straightening the fringe, what I'll do is I'll straighten it diagonally. So I'll take a section of hair, put it down here, leave that hair out of the way, pick up my section, and then just come in with my straighteners. Pick up this piece of hair, over direct it. Now once we get across the centre, so this section crosses the middle of the head, we'll swap sides and then we'll do exactly the same thing on the opposite side. So one of the great things about this way of doing it as well is it alleviates the need for any clips, so you don't have to clip your fringe, and therefore you don't put clip marks in the hair, and you don't kind of grab the whole fringe in a wanna, which Hannah was just saying. She'll have to watch this one back. But you know, people tend to just pick their whole fringe up and straighten their fringe, but what that means is you don't get to straighten the hair underneath very much, because it's where it's kinkiest. With this particular style of straightening the fringe, you get to straighten that hair right there as well, so that means it just lasts before it goes kinky. Or Hannah's had, like, you know, 5 or 6 wines and she's sweating on the dance floor.
Or often Muay Thai. Usually goes kinky then.
Can't help her then. So we've got a little bit of cleaning up to do on Hannah's fringe. I'm going to take it fractionally shorter as well, but as it's dry now, we're kind of getting the finished length that we're going to achieve. So we'll come in, we'll just clean up the line so we can visually see what we've got in terms of shape. And then we will shorten the fringe then after this and tidy it up further with our point cutting technique. So we'll just double check that we're happy with the length, which I'm going to spin Hannah around in a minute and just kind of make sure that she's okay with that length, or if she wants it a little shorter, because remember, Hannah's got to take it home, not me. I'm not going to wear Hannah's fringe, Hannah is. Right, so just check that for me, Hannah. See if you want it shorter before I tidy up the line.
Yeah, go on then.
Fraction shorter?
Yeah.
How much?
Yeah, go for it.
That's the official measurement. just guessed. About 3 millimeters. So the way we'll shorten that down now is to take our center section of hair here, rest it in our comb with 0 elevation, and cut ourselves like a guideline, if you like. And then we'll just point cut out the edges. One of the other dramas as well of cutting fringes dry is just the amount of bits that now Hannah's got on her face. She's just going to be itchy for the rest of the day. Right then, take a quick look, see if it's the same length or if it's longer on one side or if it drops down. If you step back after you've given it a little tidy up, then you'll be able to get a better perception of whether it's straight or not. And then also just take a quick look in the mirror. The mirror sort of tells you, generally speaking, if it's straight or not. So there we go, Hannah's fringe all cut, nice and simple. Hannah's hair is all finished, fringe is trimmed up, looking great. We put a little kind of mermaid style wave in there, but yeah, just a nice freshen up. But what I really wanted to kind of emphasize today was some of the things that you might want to think about when you're doing the consultation, when someone's got curly hair and they want a short fringe, some of the things that you might want to be, saying to them, and also ultimately some of the things that are achievable and you may not feel like you want to go down that route. You might not have the confidence, and hopefully this will give you a bit more confidence to make those decisions. Many a time I've had people say to me, oh, my hairdresser says I can't have a fringe or whatever, and then, you cut me a fringe in. So it's just about making those kind of confident decisions. And, it's not massively different to what we started with, not a great big transformation, but not everything has to be a great big transformation for it to be relevant, pertinent and useful. So if you found this video interesting or useful, then please hit the thumbs up button, subscribe if you want more content like this, and I'll see you again for another episode of Life Fair very, very soon.